Hey, what's up, Tribe? Happy Wednesday. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're maybe here for the first time, welcome. My name is Josh. I'm the pastor here, and I'm glad that you are tuning in with us. And before we jump into everything, I just want to see how you're doing. Let's do a quick check-in. In the comments on the right-hand side, I want you to sound off. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being, hey, I could really use some love right now. Let us know how you're doing. I would love to hear how you're doing because at the end of the day, it's not just about a message and hearing another message from me. The reality is we can get that anywhere. But the whole goal of what we're doing here on Wednesday nights and even on our Thursday night game night is to create a sense of community, a sense of connection. That's what makes this tribe a family. And so jump in right now to the comments. Let us know 1 to 10 how you're doing. And it's okay. Here's what I want you to know. It's okay to not be okay. But it's also okay to be incredibly okay. Either way, 1 to 10, it's okay with where you're at. But we want to come alongside you and really love on you and encourage you this week. And maybe you go, hey, you know what, I don't feel comfortable throwing it in the comments. You can shoot me a text or you can message me directly. I would love to hear that either way to see how you are doing. Well, hey, we are go ahead and keep doing that in the comments, but we are going to be transitioning right now into our message for tonight. And if you were tuning in with us last week, it was awesome. We had a couple of our leaders sharing with us alongside this conversation of change, transition, and the unknown. And so we're going to pick up part 2 of that, hearing from some of your leaders and hearing some of the wisdom that they have to say. And so the way that this works is we're going to hear from one of our leaders here in just a moment, and I'm going to jump back on, and I'm going to highlight some of the things that they mentioned. And because I think it's important, there's all kinds of different wisdom and nuggets, but the whole goal of this series, the whole goal has been not to just talk about change, transition, and unknowns, but to give you practical tools to work through the changes and transitions that are inevitable in our lives. And then give you some ways to think through how to deal with the unknowns that are inevitable in our lives as well. And so that's been the goal of this series, and I hope you've been taking some notes. I hope it's been encouraging to you so far, and I would highly encourage tonight, if you haven't done so already, or if you've already been doing this, bust out a journal and a pen and get ready to take some notes, because there's going to be some quality material tonight that you will want to write down. I think it's going to be incredibly helpful to you, incredibly applicable, and incredibly encouraging. So get ready, giddy up. Let's get ready to dive in. And then I'll be right back with you here in just a few moments to recap a couple of the key takeaways that I think would be really impactful for you from what one of our leaders shares. So we'll see you back here in just a minute. But before we do, let me pray for us and just ask the Lord to be with us tonight. Ready? Hey, Lord, we just thank you so much for tonight, and thank you for the joy and the honor of getting to gather still in this time, in this season, even digitally. Lord, we thank you that you are a God who desires to speak to us and who desires to help us navigate the seasons of life, good, bad, ugly. You are a God who is with us. And Lord, right now, as we are unpacking part 4 of change, transition, and unknowns, Lord, we ask that you give us eyes to see and ears to hear what you have to say to us today. Lord, we want some practical tools to walk away with tonight. That way we can apply it to the rest of our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so check this video out. We'll see you back here in just a moment.
Hey guys, it's me, Jenny. I'm here to talk about change and transition. If you notice me looking down, it's because I have some notes, so I'm not ignoring you, I swear. So the first thing about change and transition, I would say, is that there's 2 big kinds. I've gone through a lot of changes in my life, and I don't have all day to just talk about every single lesson I learned in all of them. So I'm going to talk a little bit more broad. So the 2 kinds of changes I'm going to focus on would be the change that's planned and the change that's unplanned. So a planned change would be graduating high school, moving out of my house, in with a roommate, and getting married. And those would be changes that are big, they're huge and life-changing, but they're also easier for me to navigate because I knew that they were happening and I had to prepare for them. So graduating high school is like an expected change because the day you start first grade, you know that it's all leading up to the graduation in 12th grade. And moving out was something that I had to prepare for. I had to save up money. I had to look for a roommate, buy fine furniture. Like it was a big change when it happened, but it was also expected. And then getting married, I think most people, not everyone, but most people want to get married. So when you date or court or whatever your parents make you do, you are looking forward to a relationship that's lasting. And it's not like one day you wake up and you're like, tomorrow's my wedding day, and I had no idea this was coming. There's steps that happen to it. There's a proposal, there's wedding planning, and then the wedding, and then moving in together after you're married, guys. So those would be changes that I think that you can prepare for. Then there's changes that are unplanned, and those are the ones that are the hardest to adjust to. Last year, Jared lost his job. That was really unexpected. It just came out of nowhere a couple weeks before Christmas. And that was one that was hard because we had all these plans and suddenly they changed because something happened that we didn't expect. Another change would be losing like a family member who unexpectedly passed away. That was another hard change because one day they're there and the next day they're not. And they weren't sick. It just happened. And sometimes that's the way it happens. So those would be changes that I think are the hardest, but they're also the ones that I think challenge me the most and I've grown the most from. Every single change in my life has caused growth. And that's something I think is important to remember, that every single day, whether we think about big changes and how they're impacting us, but it's every single day that's changing us too. So every day you're changing, and whether you're changing for the better or for the worse, you're changing. And I mean, looking back, I mean, when you graduate high school, not that everyone who's watching this is, because this isn't only for seniors, it's for everybody. Even look back, okay, 4 years ago, maybe there's one or two big things that have happened in the last few years and you're like, wow, that really changed me. But you can also look back and say, oh my gosh, I used to dress like that. I used to listen to that music. That was so embarrassing. It's not like one day you were like, oh my gosh, I hate that music. I hate those clothes. It happened gradually. And then you look back and you're like, oh, that was so embarrassing. I'm so much better now. So I think it's important to remember that every single day you're changing. A few of the lessons I've learned in change and transition, the first one would be who you surround yourself with is really important. Because if you're surrounding yourself with negative people who don't have the same priorities or morals or faith as you, it's a lot harder for them to either hold you accountable or encourage and support you. And if you surround yourself with negative people who are constantly tearing you down or comparing themselves or comparing you against them, it's just not a healthy friendship and it's not a healthy relationship, and it's hard for them to support you. I remember when I graduated college, or I was actually in college, and kind of between jobs, I had a really unhealthy group of friends, and it was always a competition. It felt like everything I did and the amount of money I made and where I lived, whether it was with my parents or I was looking for a roommate, it was always just not good enough. Like they constantly were like, well, when I was your age, I made this much. And when I was 21, I lived with my friends and I could afford this much rent. And they always made me feel bad because I wasn't up to their standards. And there was such a huge change from last year when Jared first lost his job. And I have a strong group of Christian women around me, and they were so supportive, like bringing me care packages, praying for me, helping look for jobs. Like they looked for leads for him. And it was just so different where I knew, okay, we're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. Because none of them would have ever let us just like live on the streets or anything. They would have been there for us 100%. So I think it's really important to remember that your friend group does matter, and they also help change you into somebody. So look at your 3 or 4 closest friends, and are they people you admire, and do they have qualities that you want to be like? Because every day you're changing, and you're changing into the people you surround yourself with.
I think the biggest lesson I've learned of all, though, is that trusting in God is number one. And that's such a churchy thing to say. Like, I would love to say that the day I became a Christian was the day I was like, I fully trust in God. I'll never question anything. And that wasn't the case. I mean, trust is built with time with people. And I felt like it took a lot of time for me to realize that God's plans were better than mine, because there were times that I was like, whether I was leaving a job, leaving a relationship, or going into school for a different degree, and I just didn't have any idea on what I was doing. And I would sometimes feel like God was asking me to do something that made no sense. Like, I worked as a mailman for the post office for a couple of years, and it was really unhealthy. It was a terrible work environment for me at the time. And I remember there's this day that I woke up and I felt like that, like all the signs were pointing to, it was time to leave. It was time to leave a job. It paid well. I was really well known there. I was high up. They were talking about someday I could be the manager and blah, blah, blah. And I remember feeling like, okay, I have to quit. I don't know why, but I feel like that's the right thing to do. And I quit. And everybody thought I was crazy. Like everybody was like, you don't have a job lined up. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, oh, if God's telling me to do this, take care of me. And he has, like, I'm an accountant now with the government. And it's really amazing because what I thought was awesome, I look back and I'm like, that was so mediocre compared to what I have now, like what God has given me. Same with Jared. I was in a relationship when we became friends. And I remember feeling like, is God asking me to leave the relationship? Like I had a little bit of a crush on Jared and I was like, what, he's not into me? I'm just giving up this thing for something I don't know. And it's just amazing because everything that I thought was the best, I looked back on and said, nope, I had the best because clearly Jared and I got married and he was a brilliant times better than anyone I've ever met. And I mean, I could go on and on with more and more stories about all of that, but I think the number one thing for me was learning how to trust God. And there was a time in my life for a couple of years where I had left church after a really bad experience. And I think the trust that I have in God now came from that. And that was, I think, the big change in my life is when my faith became my faith. I wasn't because I had grown up at Grace or my parents put me in Awana and I was homeschooled and I had never known anything else. I had purposefully left the church behind and I had gone and done my own thing. And it went horrible. And I finally, in the middle of Starbucks, decided, remember praying. I was like, this is the most basic thing in the world. But I became a Christian in the middle of Starbucks because I decided that I had no trust in my decisions. My decisions were terrible. And I was like, if God had a better plan for me, I want that. And I did. And so that would be number one change in my life. And that's where I'm now. That's why I'm here. So I think it's important to remember that whatever we think is just, what's Proverbs 3:5, where it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not in your own understanding. And my own understanding is terrible. That's why it says trust in God. So I think the number one lesson that I've learned in life is trusting in God. And even when it doesn't make sense, it sounds so cheesy and like Jesus jukey to be like, oh yeah, just God, guys. That's all you need to do. But trust God with all your heart and he'll make your path straight. And that's the number one thing. Remember. Love all of you. Miss you all.
All right. Well, hey, how was that? I really loved what Jenny had to say around some of the change, transition, and unknowns thoughts. And I've got a number of notes down, but I'm going to highlight a couple of the key pieces that I really think are applicable to us, and I think would be really helpful for us to really unpack a little bit more in our own lives and where we're at personally. And so here's the first thing is she identified changes that are planned and changes that are unplanned. How many of you have ever had changes that were planned? Yeah, you are not raising your hand maybe, or maybe you just raised your hand because the question, I'm sorry, that was awkward. But maybe, how many of you have had changes that were unplanned? Maybe parents announced that you were moving, or there was somebody lost a job, or there was a death of a family member, or there were health issues that you didn't anticipate. These are all changes that were unplanned. But the changes that were planned were maybe school. I mean, we're finished. We just finished up, for most of you, finished up this past week, an entire school year. And some of the planned changes there is that you finish and then you move on. Jenny identified moving in with roommates and having that kind of change in her life. But it was planned for. And marriage, it was planned for. But the plan to get to marriage began with dating, and then she got engaged, and then she got married, and one day she'll have 37 kids, and it's going to be awesome. Sorry, Jenny, we're praying for it. But there's changes that are planned, and there are changes that are unplanned. And I like a couple things that she alluded to, and she talked about here, and I'm going to identify those right now. The first is that we have plans, but things change because an event happened that was unexpected. And so when things change that were unexpected, how do we respond? Well, maybe we respond by, one, holding our lives loosely. I like a quote that Corrie ten Boom said, that hold everything in your hands lightly. Otherwise, it hurts when God pries your fingers open. In other words, if we always hold things close fist, when change or transition happens, often it's God working in it with us, right? Because He never leaves us nor forsakes us. But if we're always holding things so close fist, when He begins to pry open our fingers, it hurts, right? It's not a comfortable experience. But if we held our lives loosely, open-handed, it becomes easier to change and transition and to face the unknowns. The second thing is, how do we face the unexpected? Well, we can rest in knowing that tomorrow isn't promised. In fact, Proverbs 27:1 tells us to not boast about tomorrow, for we do not know what tomorrow may bring. Jesus said it another way, that we don't face tomorrow when we have today. We don't face tomorrow when we have today, because every moment matters. And then the last thing, and how do we face the unexpected, is realize that plans are helpful, but plans aren't the purpose, right? We don't face the unexpected by having a plan so much, but it's not the goal to have a plan. The goal is to get through, to realize what God might be doing in the midst of it, and partnering with Him in the moment, for the next moment, right? But plans help us move the needle forward in achieving who we are and who we need to be. They're not the purpose, but they are helpful. I think we should make that distinction. They're not the purpose, but they are helpful. Last is these are the hardest changes, but these kinds of changes have caused the most growth. And Jenny ultimately gets to the point of changes cause growth. Change causes growth. And I'll add to that if you let it, will grow you. So though change causes growth, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will grow unless you allow it to let you grow. Every day we are changing, and we are not who we were yesterday. That's the truth. We are a consecutive accumulation of who we were yesterday, plus who we are today, plus who we're becoming. And those are all built up over time to be the person that we are becoming each and every day. And so two key thoughts, in addition to that, two key big idea thoughts that Jenny shared that I really want to lean in with, because we talk about this a lot at Tribe, but it might fall to deaf ears sometimes. But you know what? This is so pertinent. And actually, Steve talked about it last week, but the first one is that who you surround yourself with is really important. Without, we miss out on the quality and support of community that comes with it. Negative people ultimately tear us down. So the comparison of negative people that comes around, it ultimately tears us apart. And comparison is a slow death. Your friend group really does matter, because you'll become like those that you hang around. And so here's some practical questions you might use to identify who you're hanging around. I mean, right now in this season might be a really good identifier for you in realizing who's really in your corner, right? Like, are they still there even when things are difficult, when things are hard? Do you still admire them, and do they admire you? Are you inspired by them, and do you inspire them? Do they have qualities that you want to emulate? What inspires you about who they are, and why? Why does that stand out? That'll help you narrow your focus of who really is in your corner. And the last big idea that Jenny shared was that trusting in God is number one. Here's the reality. Trust is built over time. It's not a I wake up and suddenly I have all the trust in the world. No, it's built over time. Why? Because it's a relationship. And so it's built over time and with people. And sometimes it takes, when it comes to God, sometimes it takes a while to see what God is up to. Sometimes He leads us and asks us to do something that doesn't make sense, but it's part of the journey of trusting Him. It's part of our relationship with Him, is learning to cultivate that spirit. What we feed our minds determines our appetites. What fuels your hearts, burns in desires, is displayed in our dreams. It is catalyzed in our actions. And so if we have trust at the foundation of of our relationship with God, then it's going to fuel our hearts. It's going to burn in our desires. We're going to desire to become more like Christ. It's going to be displayed in our dreams. We're going to think and dream about what it's like to trust God, what it's like to live in relationship with God. But then it's also going to change and inspire how we live our lives, the actions that we do day by day. But even when all of that doesn't make any sense, here's the kicker. Trust in God. It's your number one. And it's the safest place to be. It's the safest place to be in the hands of God. So the verse we want to lean in on there is Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him and he will make your paths straight. I hope that's helpful so far for you. And we've got another leader here in just a moment to share some more thoughts and wisdom. But be chewing on these thoughts as we continue tonight and hearing what God has to say to us through our leaders about change, transition, and unknown. Here we go.
Hey friends, Chantel here. I don't know how many of you know about my story, but when I think about changes and transitions and the unknowns, I think about the times when I've lived in other cities and other countries and I hadn't known anybody prior to going there, or even other schools. I've gone to a couple schools where I didn't know anybody when I showed up for the first day. And so thinking about how I handle that, it feels very overwhelming. The unknowns of you don't know who you're going to meet, you don't know where you're going to go. Overall, it just feels very overwhelming. And when dealing with those changes and transitions, I think it's very easy to get stuck in the big emotions, the fear, maybe even fear of failure, fear of not knowing anybody. I guess there's a lot of fears that go into that, but then there's also just sadness for not knowing anybody, not having a community. There's nothing familiar. So there's very big emotions. So one of the things that I have done and still do even now is kind of think big picture. Okay, why am I going? What is my purpose? And kind of cling to that. Is God sending me here? Maybe I'll cling to that. That's my purpose, right? Or it could be my purpose is to learn something. My goal in one of the countries I went to was to learn Spanish. So that's my big picture, right? That's my big goal. So clinging to that, reminding myself of that. And then the other thing is coming up with small goals and small wins, if you will. So in community is very important to me. So going to a new church, finding a new church first off in some of these other cities, looking at one church at a time, right? And going to maybe like meet one person, maybe it's a school, and just meeting one person and saying hello to one person at this new church or this new school. And then the next time I go, I'll have one face that I know, so I can say hi to that person again, and then I can say hi to a new person, right? So this is kind of a small process if you're just doing one person at a time. Try to go to all the events. In new schools, sometimes the first week of school, they have get to know you type of events. Go to all of those that you can go to. New churches, I've gone to small groups to get to know people, and then once you have that small group of people that now you know their face, the next time you go, you'll have at least somebody that you know, right? A friendly face, somebody that you recognize. So just one task at a time, breaking things up, because overall it can be overwhelming. So another area of big picture that I think about, that I've thought about a lot during this transition that we've been in, all the things that have happened. And I've got a tattoo about it, but it's going to be upside down. Let me see. It's John 16:33, and it's actually backwards, so maybe we could put a picture up. I can send a picture, but it says, the verse of John 16:33 says, in this world you will have troubles, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And my tattoo just says, but take heart, because that's all I need as the reminder to think about that verse. So that's kind of been my life verse over my adult life. because that's the verse that sends my eyes to Jesus. So in this world, we will have trouble. It's Jesus speaking, and he tells us that there's going to be trouble. But take heart, he's overcome the world. And so that's one thing that I think about, even with just, the last couple months, is big picture, right? He wins. In the end, he wins. When you get caught up in fears and unknowns, big picture, he wins. So the rest of it doesn't matter. So that's, what brings my eyes to heaven is this verse. And also, this verse kind of reminds me of the story of Jesus walking on water and Peter trying to walk on water. When your eyes focus on all the waves and you see all the trials, and you think about like, oh no, I don't know anybody at this new place, you start getting overwhelmed. Your eyes are focusing on the wrong thing. So you need to focus on Jesus. And if your eyes can focus on Jesus and think big picture in that sense, the little things fade away, right? And so that's kind of how I've handled a lot of new things. It can be exciting, but it can also feel very overwhelming. And I think that's the way that I take the overwhelming just pressure and I guess pressure is a good word. Just the feeling of just too much to handle is you kind of burst through that by thinking big picture. Maybe your why, your purpose of where you're going, what you're doing, or just in the end, Jesus wins.
All right, welcome back, and I hope that was really helpful for you as well. That was awesome, and what I really love about what Chantel just shared is how practical all of the thoughts were here. And so I'm going to highlight those practical thoughts real quick, and again, jot these down somewhere so you have them to access them when you need them. But there were 5 key thoughts that I highlighted that I think are applicable to you. One is having the permission, having the realization that unknowns feel overwhelming. Unknowns feel overwhelming, right? Jenny talked about 2 changes, ones that are planned and ones that are unplanned. But what about the unknowns? Well, the reality is unknowns can feel super overwhelming because you tend to have more questions than answers. And that's okay. But it's to give yourself permission to know that there are unknowns, but to realize that the overwhelming feeling that can come with them is easy. It's not necessarily easy, but it can be overcome. It's easy to get stuck in the big emotions: fear, failure, sadness, worry, doubt. But if we break some of that up, we can actually, or maybe even step back and go, why am I feeling this sense of overwhelm? Why am I feeling this big emotion of fear, this big emotion of sadness, this big emotion of failure, or whatever that emotion might be? When we can step back, we can then evaluate what's going on. Number 2, think big picture. Why am I going that way? Or why am I going this direction? Or why am I going a certain area in my life? Second question is, where am I heading? Where am I going that is leading me somewhere? Why is it leading me there? 3, what is God doing? So why am I going? Where am I heading? And what is God doing? Are 3 big questions that help us answer the big picture, or help us at least begin evaluating the big picture of where we're going. So you want to face the unknowns. You want to move from maybe an emotion of fear to an emotion of some sort of security that's healthy and helpful. Then ask the 3 questions that help paint the picture of the big picture that God is painting with you. Number 3, identify the small goals or the small wins and grow from there. So identify the small goals or the small wins and go from there. Some of the small goals or small wins Chantel talked about were things like getting plugged in. Whether it's here at Tribe or it's at school or it's with your friends, get plugged in, get invested in your people. Say hey, be the first to engage somebody. Sometimes in our culture, we wait for other people to say, hey, how you doing? Or hey, what's up? But why does it have to be that? Like, why can't we be the initiators? Why do we have to wait for other people? Be the first to say, hey, be an initiator of conversation, initiator of relationship. She mentioned attend the events, be a part of things. Say yes to being a part of events, things that might even stretch you beyond your comfort zone. I remember one of the first times that I went to a school dance. I was actually, I think it was like 6th grade, 7th grade, somewhere right in there. And I am not a dancer to save my life, and I would never attend these kinds of events, but somebody invited me, and because I had the invitation, I said yes. And I still didn't dance a ton, but it was fun to be able to say yes to something that brought me outside of my comfort zone. And so I wonder what that might be for you. What could you say yes to in terms of some of the events or some of the things that might be happening in life around you that would excite you or help you step outside of your comfort zone? Try something new. Try something new. I'm doing this myself right now. I don't know if you've ever heard of a slack line, but it's a long 50-foot line of rope about 2 inches wide, and I'm stretching it in between 2 different trees, and I'm learning to walk on it. And it seems pretty easy, but it's actually pretty hard, and it takes a lot of balance and core strength. But it's awesome to be able to try something new because it's helping me identify a small win along the way. So a big goal for me is to become more agile, be better balanced, to have a stronger core. And this is a skill, a practice that is fun, but it's also, I'm able to see the small wins along the way as I become better and better and better. But I'm trying it by doing something new. And then last, she mentioned find consistency. So if you want to identify small goals or small wins along the way, find consistency. Be consistent in whatever you commit to. Be consistent. Show up. If you commit to doing it once a week, do it once a week. Keep going. Give it a certain boundary, right? So you go, hey, I'm going to do this every week for this next semester. I'm going to do this every week for a full year. And whatever you commit to, follow through, right? Because that will help you identify the small goals and will help you find the things to celebrate along the way. Number 4, a practical approach to facing the change, transition, and unknowns is to break whatever you're facing into bite-sized pieces. It's so much easier to consume. If the thing you're facing feels overwhelming, give yourself the space and the permission to pause. Just pause. And then break it up into more consumable amounts. And sometimes we have to get outside of our own heads in this, and we have to invite other people into the process with us. I know I've been in situations where, or seasons of life where I've needed to call a friend and go, hey, here's what I'm facing, and I can't get outside of my head. I need you to help me break this up into smaller pieces that I can consume so that way I can tackle these step by step. In other words, find the small goals and wins along the way. So break it up into small bite-sized pieces. That way you can tackle whatever it is you're facing, even if you're facing the unknown. John 16:33 reminds us that I have told you these things so that way you may have peace. In this world we will have trouble, but we can take heart because I have overcome the world. In other words, we can take heart on whatever it is we face because God has already got us. He's already with us. He already gets it. And He wants to help us succeed. He wants to help us get there. But we have to trust, kind of what we were saying earlier, we have to trust that He knows what He's doing. And number 5, with that said, we get to take heart. We get to take heart. Difficulty, challenge is promised, but we get to take heart. Because what we focus on, we do. And what we do, we become. If we focus on the prize, the big picture, if we let the little things that don't matter as much fade away, we will succeed in that. We will achieve that. We will become that, right? Like if we go, I want to achieve what is ahead of me, and we focus on that, then we're going to put our plow to the ground and cultivate that. we're going to create something beautiful, because that is what that does. But at the end of the day, what we focus on, we do, and what we do, we become, is all about finding your why. Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Why? At the end of the day, I think the big why is to serve God, is to be a part of something bigger than yourself, to be in relationship with a holy, loving God. Why do we do what we do? Well, if it's rooted in that, it's so that way we can honor and please God, bring glory to Him through our lives. That's the goal. That's the heart. That's our why. And so this week, we're wrapping up here, and this week, I want to challenge you. Maybe you look back on the past couple weeks and some of the wisdom that was shared tonight and some of the wisdom shared previous weeks, and you just ponder on maybe an area that is difficult for you to do. Maybe you go, you know what, Josh, I don't know my why. I don't know how to get where I want to go. I don't know how to face the difficulties in my life. I don't know how to deal with change very well. I deal with planned change really well, but I don't deal with unplanned change very well. How do I do it? Well, maybe you just start there and get really honest with yourself about where you might struggle in some of that. And then maybe you reach out. I would love to come alongside you. If this is something that you want to grow in, I would love to come alongside you and help you accomplish that. Your leaders would love to help you figure some of that out. You're not alone. But I think until we recognize it, we can do nothing about it. And so what would it look like for us to do that this week? By just reflecting. Take 10 minutes this week to reflect on your notes that you've taken so far. And just go, man, where's my pain point? Or where am I most successful at? And then go from there. Well, tribe, that's all we've got for tonight. We're going to be jumping on Zoom here in just a few minutes. So get ready. The Zoom ID should be in the comments, but let me pray for you, because we are so thankful that we get to do life together. So Lord, we just thank you for tonight, and again, thank you for the joy and honor of getting to bring you praise. Lord, we ask that this week, as our students and leaders together identify how we deal with change, transition, and unknowns, Lord, that you bring to light where our pain points are, so that way we can grow better with you. Lord, give us some space this week to really come face to face with pain points and strengths. And Lord, give us the boldness to do something about it. Lord, we love you, we bless you, and we thank you for this week. And I bless these students right now in this season. In your name, amen. All right, guys, we'll see you on Zoom. Go for it right now. Go, go, go.